The woman looked at him with hollow eyes and said 6 words that made the billionaire's blood run cold. Marcus stood frozen on the rain-slicked sidewalk of downtown Manhattan, briefcase in hand, the November wind cutting through his cashmere coat like it was paper. He'd been rushing to his car, mentally sorting through merger documents and quarterly projections, when the voice stopped him. "You abandoned us." He turned slowly. The woman sat huddled against the brick wall of the building he'd just exited, a cardboard sign propped beside her. Her clothes were layered and worn, a faded blue jacket covering what looked like several shirts underneath. A wool cap covered most of her graying hair, but a few strands escaped, catching the street light. Her face was weathered, lined with years that had not been kind. But her eyes, those eyes held something that made Marcus's chest tighten with recognition he couldn't quite place. "I'm sorry," he said automatically, the way people do when confronted with homelessness, reaching for his wallet. "I can—" 20 years, she interrupted, her voice rough but steady. 20 years? And you don't even recognize me?" Marcus's hand stilled. He looked at her again, really looked. There was something in the shape of her face, the set of her jaw, a ghost of someone he might have known in another lifetime. "I don't understand," he said quietly. The woman reached into a plastic bag beside her, moving slowly, deliberately. She pulled out a photograph protected in a Ziploc bag that had been opened and resealed so many times the edges were nearly transparent. She held it up. Marcus stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. Then his world tilted. The photograph showed a summer day, bright and golden. A family sat on a checkered blanket in what looked like Central Park. A younger version of himself, maybe 25, grinning broadly with his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair. Beside them sat 2 children, a boy and a girl, both under 10, both laughing at something off camera. And standing behind them, hands on the children's shoulders, was a woman in a simple dress, her smile warm and genuine. The same woman now sitting on the cold concrete in front of him. "Diane," he whispered. Her expression didn't change. "So you do remember." Marcus felt his legs weaken. He crouched down, not caring that his $1,000 pants touched the wet ground. "Diane, what happened? How did you—" "After your wife died," she said flatly, "you sent us away. Do you remember that part? Or have you blocked it out along with everything else?" The words hit him like physical blows. Marcus closed his eyes and the memories came flooding back, sharp and unwanted. His wife Rachel's funeral, the blur of grief and whiskey. His children, Emma and Daniel, crying every night. And Diane, their nanny, the woman who'd been with them for 8 years, trying desperately to hold everything together. And then the accusations. "The money," Marcus said hoarsely. "There was money missing from Rachel's jewelry box, $5,000, and her grandmother's necklace, which I never took," Diane said, her voice breaking slightly before she steadied it. "But you didn't believe me. You were grieving, angry, and you needed someone to blame, so you called the police, filed a report, had me arrested." Marcus remembered. God, how could he have forgotten? The detective had been sympathetic but firm. The evidence was circumstantial. But Marcus had been so certain, so consumed by rage and loss, that someone would take advantage of his family in their darkest hour. "The charges were dropped," he said weakly. "After 3 days in jail," Diane replied. "After my name was in the papers. After every family I'd worked for saw the headlines. Nanny accused of theft. Nobody cares about the follow-up story, Marcus. Nobody hires someone who's been accused, even if they're innocent." Marcus stared at the photograph still in her hands. He remembered that day so clearly now. They'd gone to the park to celebrate Daniel's 9th birthday. Diane had baked the cake herself, spent hours decorating it to look like a baseball field because that's what Daniel loved. Rachel had insisted Diane join them in the photo. "You were family," Rachel had said, looping her arm through Diane's. "Don't be silly. Get in here." "I tried to find work," Diane continued. "For months, I applied everywhere. Daycares, schools, private families. But the background checks always came back with that arrest. It didn't matter that the charges were dropped. The stain was there. "Why didn't you come to me?" Marcus asked, knowing even as he said it how hollow it sounded. Diane laughed, a bitter sound. "Come to you? The man who called me a thief? The man who looked me in the eye and said I'd betrayed his dying wife's trust?" She shook her head. "I had nothing left, Marcus. My savings ran out. I couldn't make rent. My sister tried to help, but she had her own family, her own struggles. One bad month became 6. 6 became a year. And here we are." Marcus felt sick. He looked at the photograph again, at the faces frozen in a moment of pure happiness. Emma had been 7 in that picture, her front tooth missing, grinning up at Diane like she hung the moon. Daniel had been holding Diane's hand. "The kids," he said suddenly, do they, remember me?" Diane's expression softened slightly. "I don't know. They were young, and I'm sure after everything you didn't speak my name in that house again." She was right. Marcus had scrubbed every trace of Diane from their lives, the photos with her in them, tucked away in boxes, her contact information deleted. He'd hired a new nanny within the week, an efficient woman named Patricia, who kept the children fed and on schedule, but never quite connected with them the way Diane had. Emma and Daniel were adults now. Emma was 27, working as a lawyer in Boston. Daniel was 25, teaching high school English in Brooklyn. Both had grown up, moved on, built lives of their own. They spoke to Marcus maybe once a month, cordial but distant. He'd always told himself it was natural that children grew up and away. But looking at this photograph, seeing the warmth and joy that used to fill their home, he wondered if he'd driven them away long before they ever left. "I've thought about you over the years," Diane said quietly. "Wondered if you ever found out the truth. If you ever felt guilty." "What truth?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew. Diane reached into her bag again and pulled out a folded piece of newspaper, yellow and brittle with age. She handed it to him. The headline read, "Metropolitan Museum Intern Arrested in String of Burglaries." Marcus unfolded it with trembling hands. The article was from 19 years ago, just months after Rachel's death. It detailed the arrest of a woman named Patricia Chen, a part-time museum intern who had been systematically stealing from the homes she visited, often targeting families during vulnerable times, funerals, hospitalizations, divorces. Among the items recovered, the article noted, was an antique diamond necklace matching the description of one reported stolen by the Westwood family following a theft by a former employee. "Patricia," Marcus breathed, "the woman I hired to replace you." "She worked at the museum where your wife was on the board," Diane said. "She'd been to your house before for fundraising events. She knew the layout, knew about Rachel's jewelry. When Rachel died, she saw an opportunity. She applied to be your nanny under a slightly different name, Patricia Moore, instead of Patricia Chen. And you were so desperate, so grief-stricken, you didn't check her references as thoroughly as you should have." Marcus's hands were shaking. "The necklace. They recovered it?" "According to the police report I finally got my hands on, yes, 5 years after the fact, when I was trying to clear my name for a background check. But by then, the damage was done. Nobody cared that I was innocent. Nobody except me." The rain was falling harder now, but neither of them moved. Marcus looked at the woman in front of him, seeing not the homeless person others walked past without a second glance, but the woman who used to braid Emma's hair every morning, who taught Daniel how to tie his shoes, who stayed up all night when either child was sick, reading stories until her voice went hoarse. The woman he'd destroyed. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate. "God, Diane, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was grieving," she finished. "I know. I understood that even then, but understanding doesn't change what happened." She looked down at the photograph, running her thumb gently over the image. "I kept this. Through everything, every shelter, every night on the street, every time I had to choose between food and keeping my few possessions safe, I kept this. Do you know why? Marcus shook his head, unable to speak. Because I needed to remember that I was real once, that I mattered to someone, that I had a purpose. Her voice cracked. And because I loved them, your kids. I loved them like they were my own. A car horn blared somewhere in the distance. People rushed past them, umbrellas up, focused on their own destinations, their own lives. None of them stopped. None of them saw. Marcus thought about his life. The penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the vacation home in the Hamptons, the cars, the restaurants, the business deals that filled his days with purpose and his nights with emptiness. He thought about Emma's last phone call, brief and polite, mentioning she couldn't make it to Thanksgiving this year. He thought about Daniel's carefully worded texts, always friendly but never warm. He thought about the man he'd become after Rachel died, hard, suspicious, walled off, so determined never to be hurt again that he'd forgotten how to be human. "Let me help you," he said urgently. "Please, let me make this right." Diane studied him for a long moment. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because you feel guilty? Because seeing me like this makes you uncomfortable? Or because you actually care what happens to me?" "All of it," Marcus admitted, "but mostly because you deserved better. You deserved better 20 years ago, and you deserve better now. And because, his voice broke, because I owe you more than I can ever repay." Diane looked away, toward the stream of people and traffic. "You can't fix 20 years, Marcus. You can't give me back my career, my apartment, my dignity. You can't erase the nights I spent terrified, wondering if I'd freeze to death. You can't undo the shame." "No," he agreed, "but I can start somewhere. Please, let me try." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Diane looked back at him, and in her eyes he saw something he didn't deserve, a flicker of the kindness that used to define her. "There's a shelter," she said slowly, 3 blocks from here, St. Catherine's. They have a meal program. I was heading there before you came out." "I'll drive you," Marcus said immediately. "In that?" She gestured to his BMW parked at the curb, gleaming black and obscenely expensive. "Yes, in that. Please." Diane hesitated, then slowly gathered her belongings. The photograph went carefully back into its protective bag. Marcus helped her stand, shocked by how light she felt, how fragile. This woman who used to chase his children around the apartment, who carried groceries and laundry, and the weight of their grief, now seemed insubstantial, like she might blow away in the wind. He opened the passenger door for her. She paused before getting in, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "This doesn't fix anything," she said. "I know. And I don't forgive you." "I don't expect you to." She nodded once, then slid into the car. Marcus closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his mind racing. He had no plan, no clear idea of what came next. He only knew that walking away was not an option, not this time. The shelter was warm, at least. That was Marcus's first thought as he stepped through the heavy double doors behind Diane. The smell hit him next, a mixture of industrial cleaner, coffee, and too many bodies in too small a space. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh white glow. Diane moved through the space with practiced efficiency, nodding to a few people she recognized. A woman behind a desk looked up and smiled. "Diane, good timing. We've got hot soup tonight, chicken noodle." "Thanks, Grace." Diane turned to Marcus, who stood awkwardly near the entrance, still in his expensive coat, looking wildly out of place. "You can go now." "I'd like to stay," he said, "if that's all right." Grace's eyes moved between them, clearly curious, but too professional to ask. Diane sighed. "Fine. But you're not doing this for show. If you stay, you help. What do you need?" "Those tables need setting up. 40 chairs, trays and utensils over there." She pointed to a stack against the wall. Marcus set down his briefcase and removed his coat. He could feel eyes on him as he worked, unfolding chairs, arranging them in rows. His hands, used to signing contracts and typing emails, fumbled with the metal clasps. A chair collapsed on his foot. He bit back a curse. "Other way?" a voice said. He looked up to find a young man, maybe 19, watching him with amusement. "The clasp goes backward first." "Right, thank you." The young man studied him. "You're new." "I am? Volunteer?" Marcus hesitated. Something like that. They worked in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of chairs unfolding, tables being set. Marcus found himself sweating despite the November cold he'd just left behind. When had he last done physical labor? Years, decades maybe. Diane was across the room talking to Grace and another woman in a volunteer vest. She glanced his way once, her expression unreadable. By the time the meal service started, Marcus's back ached and his hands were dirty. People filed in slowly, a mix of ages and faces, each carrying stories he couldn't begin to imagine. Diane had been right. You couldn't see them, really see them, from the window of a BMW. He watched as Diane helped serve food, spooning soup into bowls with steady hands, offering a smile to each person who came through the line. Some smiled back, some stared straight ahead, taking their meal without acknowledgement. Others stopped to chat with her, clearly familiar, clearly grateful for the connection. "That's Diane's gift," Grace said, appearing beside Marcus. "She sees people, really sees them. You know her well?" "As well as anyone here. She's been coming for about 5 years. Started as someone receiving help, then began volunteering when she could. She's good with the kids especially, reads to them while their parents sort out housing appointments or job applications." Grace looked at him directly. "And you are?" "An old friend," Marcus said, the words feeling both true and impossibly inadequate. Grace nodded slowly. "She doesn't talk about her past much, but I've learned that everyone here has one, and it's usually more complicated than people think." After the meal service ended, Marcus helped clean up. Diane worked beside him, scraping plates, wiping tables. The silence between them was heavy, but not entirely uncomfortable. "You did good work tonight," she said finally. "I folded chairs." "You showed up." "That's more than most people do." She paused, her hand stilling on the table she was wiping. "There's something you should know." "About Emma and Daniel." Marcus's heart clenched. "What about them?" "After you fired me, after the arrest, Emma called me. She was 7, but she'd figured out how to use your phone. She left me a voicemail." Diane's voice was thick with emotion. She was crying. "She said she didn't understand why I left. She said she loved me and wanted me to come back." Marcus felt like he'd been punched. "I never knew. Daniel tried to run away once, about a month after I was gone. Patricia found him at the bus station. He told her he was looking for me. He had $12 and a drawing he'd made for me." She looked at Marcus directly. "They grieved me, Marcus, like I died. And you never let them have closure. You just erased me and expected them to move on." "What did you do?" Marcus asked quietly. "When Emma called?" "I didn't call back. I couldn't. What would I say? That their father thought I was a thief? That I was sleeping in my car?" She shook her head. "I changed my number. Disappeared completely. I told myself it was better that way. Cleaner. Let them forget me and move forward." "But they didn't forget." "No," Diane said softly. "I don't think they did, and neither did I." Marcus pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He scrolled through his contacts and found Emma's number. "I should call them. Tell them you're here. They'd want to know." "Stop." Diane's hand covered his, stilling his fingers. "You can't just drop this on them out of nowhere. They've built lives, Marcus. They've moved on. Dragging up the past because you feel guilty, it's not fair to them. But they loved you. You said so yourself. They loved the woman I was, the nanny who made them breakfast and helped with homework. They don't know this version of me. She gestured to herself, to the worn clothes and the weariness etched into her features, and maybe they shouldn't have to. Marcus looked at her, at the photograph she'd shown him, now tucked carefully back in her bag. "What do you want, Diane?" "Just tell me what you want, and I'll do it." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I want my life back." But we both know that's impossible. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Diane in whatever shelter bed she'd managed to secure, thinking about the 20 years he'd stolen from her with one careless, grief-fueled accusation. At 2 a.m, he got up and went to his study. The room was lined with built-in shelves, filled with business books and framed photos of achievements, awards dinners, ribbon cuttings, not a single photo of his children after Rachel died. He dug through the closet until he found them, the boxes he'd packed away. Photo albums from when the kids were young, birthday parties, school plays, beach vacations, and there in almost every photo was Diane. Not just in the background, but central to their lives, holding a sleeping Daniel, laughing with Emma, standing beside Rachel with an easy familiarity that spoke of deep friendship. Marcus pulled out his laptop and began searching. It took an hour, but he finally found it. The old police report, the arrest record, and then the follow-up article about Patricia Chen's conviction. The recovered items, including Rachel's grandmother's necklace, worth $50,000. He'd never even known it was found, never followed up, never checked. He'd been too consumed with his own grief, too busy building walls around his heart. The next morning, Marcus called his lawyer. "Richard, I need you to do something for me, and I need it done yesterday." "Of course. What do you need?" 20 years ago, a woman named Diane Foster was arrested for theft from my home. The charges were dropped, but the arrest record remains. I want it expunged, completely. I want her record cleared, and I want a formal acknowledgement from the police department that she was wrongfully accused. That's going to be tricky, Marcus. The charges were dropped, but expungement requires— I don't care what it requires. Make it happen. And Richard, I want a statement prepared on my letterhead, taking full responsibility for the false accusation. I want it dated, notarized, and submitted to every agency that might have her information on file. There was a pause. Are you sure about this? It could open you up to legal liability. I'm sure. Get it done. His next call was harder. He dialed Emma's number, his heart pounding. Dad, is everything okay? Her voice was concerned. He rarely called, and never this early. Emma, I need to ask you something. Do you remember Diane? Silence. Then, Diane Foster? Our nanny? Yes. Of course I remember her. Dad, why are you asking about Diane? That was 20 years ago. Marcus took a breath. Do you remember why she left? Another pause, longer this time. When Emma spoke again, her voice was colder. You fired her. You accused her of stealing from Mom. Do you remember how you felt when she left? Dad, I really don't have time for a trip down memory lane. I have a deposition in an hour. Please, Emma. This is important. He heard her sigh. I was devastated. We both were. Daniel cried for weeks. I used to sneak into his room at night because he'd wake up calling for her. We didn't understand why she just disappeared. Patricia said she'd moved away, that she didn't care about us anymore. But I never believed that. Diane loved us. Marcus closed his eyes. She did. She does. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I found her. And Emma, I was wrong. About everything. He told her the whole story. The photograph, the police report he'd never followed up on. Patricia Chen's conviction. 20 years of Diane's life, destroyed because of his grief and suspicion. Emma was silent for so long Marcus thought the call had dropped. Then he heard her crying, soft and broken. Oh, Dad, what did you do? Something unforgivable. but I'm trying to make it right. I need to know, would you want to see her? Would Daniel? Are you seriously asking me that? Emma's voice shook. She was the only mother figure we had after Mom died. Patricia was cold, mechanical. She fed us and kept us on schedule, but she never loved us. Diane loved us, and you took her away. I know. Where is she now? Marcus hesitated. She's struggling, Emma. These past 20 years, they've been hard. How hard? He couldn't bring himself to say the word homeless, not to his daughter, not about the woman who'd been like family. Hard enough that she needs help, real help, and she deserves it. I want to see her, Emma said immediately, and Daniel will too. Don't make decisions for us this time, Dad. We're adults. Let us choose. Okay, I'll arrange something. Dad? Emma's voice softened slightly. I'm glad you found her. I'm glad you're trying to fix this, but you should know, this doesn't fix things between us. The way you shut down after Mom died, the way you pushed everyone away, it wasn't just Diane who got hurt. I know, Marcus said quietly. I'm starting to understand that. After hanging up, he sat in his study for a long time, staring at the photos spread across his desk. A family he'd let fracture, a woman he'd wronged, 20 years of mistakes he couldn't undo. But maybe, just maybe, he could start building something new. He found Diane at St. Catherine's that afternoon. She was in the children's corner reading to a small group of kids. Her voice was animated, changing for each character, making the children giggle. Marcus waited until she finished, until the children scattered to other activities. Then he approached. I talked to Emma, he said. Diane looked up sharply. Marcus, I told you. She remembers you. She and Daniel both do. They never forgot. And Emma wants to see you, so does Daniel. He pulled out his phone and showed her the text Emma had sent an hour ago. Please tell Diane I've missed her every day for 20 years, and that I'm sorry we couldn't protect her from what you did. Please tell her we love her. Diane's hands shook as she read the message. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I can't see them like this. Look at me, Marcus. I'm not the woman they remember. You're exactly the woman they remember, the one who loved them unconditionally, the one who made them feel safe. That doesn't change because your circumstances did. They'll pity me? No, Marcus said firmly. They'll love you. Like they always have. Diane wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to decide right now. But Diane, there's something else. He handed her an envelope. My lawyer is working on expunging your arrest record. It'll take a few weeks, but we're expediting it. You'll have a clean background check. She stared at the envelope without opening it. Why are you doing this? Because it's the bare minimum of what you're owed. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I'm trying to be the man my wife believed I was. The man my children needed me to be. I failed at that for 20 years. I'm not going to fail anymore. Diane finally opened the envelope. Inside was a check, more money than she'd seen in 2 decades. This is too much, she said immediately. It's not enough. It's 20 years of the salary you should have earned, 20 years of the life you should have had. It doesn't cover the pain or the trauma, but it's a start. I can't accept this. You can, and you will, because you earned it, Diane. You earned it by being the best nanny 2 children could have asked for. You earned it by surviving 20 years of hell that I caused. You earned it by keeping that photograph, by remembering who you were, even when the world tried to make you forget. She looked down at the check, then at the photograph she still carried in her bag. If I take this, she said slowly, I don't want you to think it means I forgive you. I don't expect your forgiveness. And I don't want you to think this makes us even. We'll never be even. I know that. She nodded slowly, folding the check and putting it in her pocket. There's a housing program Grace told me about. For people transitioning out of homelessness. With this I could qualify. I could get an apartment, small, but mine. Whatever you need, Marcus said. If you need more, if you need help with deposits or furniture or—" "This is enough," she interrupted. "More than enough. The rest I'll do myself. I need to do it myself. Do you understand?" He did. It was about dignity, about rebuilding on her own terms. "But Marcus," she continued, "if Emma and Daniel really want to see me, if this isn't just guilt talking, then yes, I'd like to see them too." Marcus felt relief wash over him so powerfully his knees almost buckled. "I'll set something up. Somewhere quiet, private, no pressure." "Okay," Diane whispered. "Okay." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in his mother's old house in Brooklyn. He'd inherited it years ago but rarely visited, keeping it maintained but empty. It was smaller than his penthouse, cozier, filled with memories of family dinners and holiday gatherings. It felt right for this. He'd set up the living room carefully, fresh flowers on the table, photos from the old albums scattered around, pictures of happier times. He'd even tracked down the baseball cake Diane had made for Daniel's 9th birthday, the one from the photograph, and had a baker recreate it. It sat on the kitchen counter, perfect and waiting. Diane arrived first. Marcus almost didn't recognize her. She was wearing new clothes, simple but clean, her hair freshly cut and styled. She'd gained a little weight, the hollow look starting to fade from her cheeks. The apartment Grace had helped her find was small but stable. She'd been there for 2 weeks now, slowly rebuilding, but she was nervous. Marcus could see it in the way she twisted her hands, the way her eyes kept darting to the door. "They're good people," he said gently. "You helped make them that way. What if they're disappointed? What if I'm not what they remember?" "You could never disappoint them." Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Marcus went to answer it, his own heart pounding. Emma stood on the steps, Daniel beside her. They'd come together, presenting a united front. Emma was tall now, her mother's dark hair cut in a professional bob. She wore a lawyer's suit, looked every inch the successful professional. But her eyes, they were the same, warm and uncertain. Daniel was broader, taller than Marcus now, with his mother's gentle expression. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, carried himself with a teacher's easy confidence. "They're here," Marcus called back to Diane. The kids stepped inside. Emma's eyes swept the room, landing on the photographs, the recreated cake. Then she saw Diane, standing near the fireplace, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma made a sound, something between a sob and a laugh, and crossed the room in 3 quick steps. "Diane?" she whispered, and wrapped her arms around the woman who'd raised her. Diane's composure broke. She held Emma tight, crying openly, one hand coming up to touch Emma's hair like she couldn't quite believe she was real. Daniel joined them, his own eyes wet. The 3 of them stood there, holding each other. 20 years of grief and loss, and love finally finding release. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching. He'd thought this moment might hurt, seeing his children embrace someone else, finding in her what they'd never quite found in him. But instead, he felt grateful. Grateful that they'd had her, even briefly. Grateful that she'd survived to see this moment. Grateful for a chance, however small, to make something right. Eventually, they moved to the couch. Emma sat on one side of Diane, Daniel on the other, neither willing to let her go. They talked for hours, about the past, about the present, about the years in between. Diane told them about her life, honestly but gently. She didn't spare herself, but she didn't wallow either. She'd survived. She was here. That was what mattered. Emma and Daniel told her about their lives, about law school and teaching, about their relationships and their dreams, about the hole her absence had left and how they'd tried to fill it but never quite could. "I used to tell my students," Daniel said, "about this woman who taught me that books were doors to other worlds, that reading was an adventure. They'd ask who she was, and I'd say she was my nanny. But that word never felt big enough. You were so much more than that." "You were our family," Emma added. When Mom died, everything fell apart. But you held us together for as long as you could. And when Dad—" She glanced at Marcus, her expression complicated. "When you were gone, we fell apart completely. Patricia kept us alive, but you kept us whole." Diane wiped her eyes. "I wanted to come back so many times. I'd walk by your school, Daniel, watch you at recess. I'd see Emma's debate team in the paper and feel so proud, but I couldn't reach out. I thought it would only hurt you more." "It hurt more not knowing," Emma said. "Not understanding. We thought you'd abandoned us." "Never," Diane said fiercely. "I loved you then, and I've loved you every day since, even from a distance." Marcus had stayed quiet, letting them have this moment. But now Emma turned to him. "Dad, I think you should tell her." He looked confused. "Tell her what?" "About why you really brought her here, about the other thing." Marcus shook his head. "Emma, this isn't the time." "Yes, it is. She deserves to know." Diane looked between them, puzzled. "Know what?" Emma stood, walked to where her bag sat by the door, and pulled out a folder. She handed it to Diane. "Dad's lawyer sent this to me last week. He wanted to make sure I approved before moving forward." Diane opened the folder slowly. Inside were legal documents, dense with language she had to read twice to understand. Then a third time, because it couldn't possibly say what she thought it said. "It's a trust," Marcus said quietly. "In your name. Enough to live on comfortably for the rest of your life. Enough for anything you might need. Education, health care, travel, whatever you choose." Diane looked up sharply. "Marcus, no. The money you gave me was already too much. That money was back pay. This is different. This is what I should have done 20 years ago, what Rachel would have wanted me to do." He stepped closer. "She left provisions in her will. Did you know that? Money set aside for you, for your future. But I was so angry after her death, so convinced you'd betrayed us, that I had the lawyer redirect the funds. I stole from you twice, Diane. Once your reputation, once your inheritance. I'm trying to return at least one of those things." Diane's hands trembled on the papers. "I don't need your money. I just needed the truth. I needed my name cleared." "You have that," Emma interjected. "Dad made sure. Your record is completely expunged. But Diane, please take this. Not for him, for you. You gave us years of your life, years of love and care. Let us give something back." "Us?" Diane looked at Emma, then Daniel. "We contributed too," Daniel said. "Not as much as Dad, obviously, but what we could. This trust, it's from all of us. It's our way of saying thank you. And I'm sorry. And we love you." Diane pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. When she finally looked up, her eyes found Marcus. "Why?" she asked simply. "After all this time, why now?" Marcus thought about the question, about the rain-slicked sidewalk and the photograph, and the moment his world had tilted back into focus. "Because I saw you," he said, "really saw you. And I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't walk away knowing what I'd done, what I'd taken from you. I've spent 20 years building walls, protecting myself from hurt. But those walls didn't just keep pain out. They kept everything out. Love, connection, humanity. I became exactly the kind of person Rachel would have been ashamed of. The kind of person you never were, even when you had every right to be." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You kept that photograph. Through everything, you kept it. You didn't burn it or throw it away or curse our names. You kept it because you remembered love, even after we'd shown you cruelty. That's who you are. And it made me want to be better, not for redemption, not to ease my conscience, but because you deserve to see that goodness rewarded, not punished." Diane was quiet for a long time. Then she set the papers aside and stood. She walked to where the baseball cake sat, still perfect after all these years. "You remembered," she said softly. "I remembered everything," Marcus replied. "I just spent 20 years trying to forget." She turned back to him, and in her eyes he saw something shift. Not forgiveness, not entirely, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "I need you to know," she said, "that this doesn't erase what happened. I spent nights on the street, Marcus. I was assaulted twice. I got sick with pneumonia and nearly died because I couldn't afford a doctor. I lost myself for a while, forgot what it felt like to be treated like a person. Money can't erase those memories." "I know. But," she continued, and her voice softened, "I also need you to know that I see what you're trying to do. And it matters, not because it fixes everything, but because you're trying. That's more than a lot of people would do." Emma moved to stand beside Diane, Daniel on her other side. A unit, a family, one that Marcus had broken, but that somehow, impossibly, was beginning to heal. "So what happens now?" Daniel asked. Diane looked at the three of them, at the photos scattered around the room, at the cake that represented a moment frozen in time. "Now," she said, "we eat cake. And we talk. And we see if we can build something new from the pieces of what we lost." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a start. And sometimes a start was enough. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the back of a community center in Brooklyn, watching as Diane read to a room full of children. Her voice was strong and clear, animated with expression. The kids were transfixed, hanging on every word. This was her 3rd week running the program. Story Nest, she'd called it, borrowing the name from a different story but making it her own. It was funded by the Trust, offering free literacy programs to underserved communities. Diane had found her purpose again, her reason. Emma and Daniel came when they could. Emma had taken on pro bono work for families experiencing homelessness, using her legal skills to help others navigate the system that had failed Diane. Daniel had started a book drive at his school, collecting thousands of volumes that now filled the shelves of Diane's program. They gathered for dinner once a month, usually at the Brooklyn house. The conversations were easier now, more natural. There were still hard moments, things that couldn't be forgotten or overlooked. But there was also laughter and shared memories, and slowly, carefully, new trust being built. Marcus had changed too. He'd sold the penthouse, downsized to something smaller, more manageable. He'd stepped back from some of his business ventures, focusing instead on philanthropy. He'd established a foundation in Rachel's name, supporting organizations that helped people like Diane, people who'd fallen through society's cracks. It didn't make him a hero. He knew that. He was simply a man trying to atone for wrongs he could never fully right. But he was trying, and that, Diane had told him once, was what mattered. As the reading session ended and children scattered to other activities, Diane looked up and caught his eye. She smiled, not the warm, unreserved smile from 20 years ago, but something more complicated. A smile that acknowledged pain and healing both. Marcus smiled back. Outside, autumn leaves fell in golden drifts. The air smelled of rain and coffee and possibility. Emma would be here soon, bringing dinner. Daniel had promised to stop by after his last class. They weren't the family they'd been. They never would be. Too much had broken. Too much time had passed. But they were becoming something else. Something harder won and more honest. A family built not on perfection or innocence, but on the harder work of accountability and grace. And in the photograph that now sat on Diane's mantel, beside new pictures of new memories, 4 faces smiled out at the world. A moment of joy preserved forever, a reminder of what had been lost and, in its own way, what had been found again. Sometimes the past couldn't be rewritten. Sometimes wrongs couldn't be fully righted. But sometimes, if you were willing to try, if you were brave enough to face what you'd done, and humble enough to make amends, broken things could be mended. Not restored, not made perfect, but mended. Stronger in some places for having been broken, and in the end, that was enough. Thank you for sharing this moment of chance, connection, and meaning. If this story reminded you that fate often hides in everyday moments and that it's never too late to try to make things right, then please subscribe to Lucky Encounters. We bring you heartfelt tales of serendipity, where a simple twist of life can change everything. Until next time, stay open, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes luck is just love in disguise. Subscribe now.